Hello and welcome to the latest Manufacturing Management live panel discussion. Today's session is sponsored by Inawisdom, an expert in artificial intelligence and machine learning based data analytics. My name is Chris Beck, I'm the editor of Manufacturing Management, and I'm delighted to be joined by an expert lineup today. Before I introduce them, a little bit about what we're going to be discussing over the next 45 minutes or so. With technology entering our lives at ever increasing pace, we're going to be looking at what are the next steps in the Industry 4 revolution. Most manufacturers are now at some point along their journey towards smart manufacturing, but we're going to be looking at where they can go next, what they can do to further maximize their operations. And to this end, Inawisdom have recently released a white paper entitled Time for Industry 4.0, the next stage in the data revolution. And there'll be a link to that in the description below this video and on any emails and everything else you might see. So please do take the time to have a look through that, which will help expand on some of the things that we're going to be discussing today. But to help me get the ball rolling on discussing all that, I'm delighted to be joined, as I said, by three experts, a great panel today. So I'll get you all to properly introduce yourselves in just a second, but quickly we have Robin Meehan, founder and managing director of our sponsors Inawisdom, Kevin Smith, industrial digital technology advisor at Made Smarter, and last but not least, Mandy Ridyard, finance director of Yorkshire-based high precision engineering company Produmax. Thanks all of you for joining me today. And Robin, if we can start with you, can you tell us a bit more about Inawisdom, what you offer to manufacturers, and maybe a bit about the report that you've recently released?
Sure, and thanks for the intro. So yes, I'm Robin Meehan, I'm the managing director at Inawisdom, and our mission really is to help our customers to exploit the latent value of the data. So it's about helping organizations to exploit the data they have for competitive advantage, essentially. So in the manufacturing space, obviously that's a massive subject and topic, as you've just outlined. Hence, we produced the report you just referred to, because it's we've done a number of projects. We see lots of projects in this sector, and I can talk about some of them maybe today on the call, to bring it to life a bit. Some of them are brought out in the report also, and I think it's a really timely and exciting area. There's lots to be done and lots of, if like, untapped potential for exploiting this data. So using sort of classic descriptive analytics, but also AI and machine learning. So I'm sure we'll get into that today.
Great, thanks, Robin. Kevin, we've spoken a lot about Made Smarter as a publication in the past, but for those who've not come across what it is that you do, could you maybe explain the program and kind of what you offer to manufacturers?
Sure, and thanks for the invite to this afternoon session. So yeah, we are a government-backed program. We unite people with the digital tools, innovation skills to make a everyday difference in their business. So there's sort of three main parts to our program. The first part is the innovation part. So we're working with technology, people developing the technologies to help them bring those products and services to market. The second part is the adoption part of the program. That's probably the bit in the middle that joins everything together. So that's working with manufacturing SMEs to really understand the challenges they're faced with, and then to try to help them find the technologies that can help solve those challenges. So it's all about adopting those technologies into their business. And of course, the third and arguably most important part is the skills side of it, because technology on its own is useless. It needs people to make it happen. So we have a sort of skills and leadership development program alongside the work that we do. So we work with manufacturing SMEs across sort of 4 different regions in the UK. We work across the Northwest, the Northeast, the West Midlands, and Yorkshire. And we support manufacturing SMEs. We help them with advice, guidance. We offer grant funding, 50% matched grant funding to invest in the technologies. So it's quite a comprehensive package of support that we offer.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And finally, Mandy, at the kind of manufacturing side of things, Produmax is a very interesting company. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of what makes you quite so special?
Well, I'll let you decide on that yourself, but we're based in Bradford in Yorkshire. We're predominantly aerospace engineers, and our prime product are the flight control components. So those are the bits that are on the wing. When you see the flaps move, we help manufacture those. So we're basically taking bits of metal, bashing them about a bit, so subtracting metal from them. So we're subtractive engineers and then assembling them into components. But we've also started our additive journey too. And so we've won quite a lot of awards, and a lot of those are based around how we've developed the company in terms of our technology, but also how we've developed our company in terms of our people. And I think those two things go hand in hand.
Thanks, Mandy. Yeah, absolutely. We'll be talking, I'm sure, people will come up as much as technology does today. But if we can start, Robin, I'll come to you first. A kind of overall kind of holistic look, I suppose, at where UK manufacturing is in terms of its digital journey, I suppose. How would you say it's kind of moved on in the last few years, and do you see a kind of growing appetite for digitalization and kind of embracing technology a bit more in the past few years?
Sure. I think that it's I guess I'd characterize it as sort of slow but steady adoption and exploitation of new digital technologies and opportunities. I think that there's a number of challenges or perceived challenges or barriers that are slowing that adoption down. And what strikes me is that we do some very interesting sort of flagship projects with manufacturers, but I feel that there's also still a big sort of industry 4.0 thing on the kind of CIO's task list that is rarely kind of completely ticked off, if you like, and partly through lots of distraction and lots of activity and just busyness, and also sort of knowing where to start. And then getting into the specific area of the sort of the data enablers for that. I think that there's that's actually a kind of a bit further down the road, I'd say, in the sense that the data that organizations hold is maybe some years back would have been a constraint or a barrier, and now actually it's almost the other way around, as in there's so much data captured from the shop floor or from instrumentation, IoT devices and so on, and other systems, both sort of in the kind of shop floor sort of factory environment and also in the field for devices that have been produced for sort of support and maintenance in the field as well. So data availability is not such a barrier anymore, I would say. It's more of an exploitation gap rather than a data gap, although there's still data access challenges with sort of as a kind of legacy washes out of the kind of manufacturing environment.
Absolutely. Kevin, is that something you've seen as well, obviously working predominantly with SMEs? Is that a similar sort of picture that you're getting?
Yeah, absolutely. We started out our program sort of nearly lose track of time, don't you? Three, maybe 4 years ago now. But certainly, exactly as Robin was saying, that's how we've sort of seen things progress. Industry 4 was the vision when we set out. There's a long way to go to realise that vision still. But the companies we've worked with, we've found, a very early stage. So, getting the right systems in place. And as Robin explained, I think that we've probably moved now to a point where companies have the basic data capture and basic systems in place, but they've got too much data and they don't know what to do with it. I read the report this morning that you've produced, and I thought it was a really great overview of where we are actually, the kind of state of play at the moment. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, what you're saying.
And Mandy, are you finding yourselves being, overwhelmed with data? And oh, she's disappeared. There she is. There we go. Are you finding yourselves a bit like Kevin was saying there, with lots and lots and lots of data and no idea of how to do it, or have you kind of found ways of maximising your data and getting the most out of what the shop floor is telling you, I suppose?
I think we have digitized quite heavily, and so I think we collect an awful lot of data. I think it's true to say getting that data into information to act on is always going to be a struggle for a number of reasons. One is that if we really wanted to do that properly, we'd be using some form of quantum computing, knowing where to start and doing that effectively as an SME with the constraints of cost make that difficult. I also think that for SMEs often, and certainly true in my business, is the accuracy of that data is really important. So the whole data cleansing operation before you start is a mammoth task in itself, making sure that everything you're starting with in the first place is correct. So data is the same as anything, isn't it? It's a strength and a weakness, depending on where you're sat and what you want to do with it. The whole thing for us is there is so much we could be doing, is where to go first for the best results, I think.
Robin, is there anything, or Kevin, is there anything you'd say to what Mandy said there?
Yeah, I just have to jump in on some of that. So brilliant. So yes, I think, like I say, I think data availability, just to build on that a second, it may sound a bit strange for the the organization that I lead, but it's an asset and a curse, right? In the sense of and just to go back maybe, I don't know, 10 years. So when the phrase big data became very in vogue, I think there was a kind of tacit assumption, this is maybe in IT circles, but like also in the kind of, as it became on the mass media understood term, I think it was a tacit assumption that big data therefore must equal big value. And just to spell out, a lot of this data is so the sort of exhaust, sort of the machine exhaust from these sensor and instrumentation devices. There's an awful lot of very dull, low value data, right? And that's not a bad thing, because like dull, low value data means like it's working like it should be and it's not broken, let's say, right? So you're looking, you're largely looking for anomalies, or so-called sort of like a needle in a haystack. So it's anomaly detections for alerting and visibility and say predictive maintenance and those kind of things. So one of the natures of the opportunity is there's a lot of data, and that then brings in the points that were just made, like around how you just raw data management, information management. So therefore you need to store that in some kind of data platform to allow you to better do something with it, right? So just to get rid of the kind of access barriers to tap into that value. The other thing I just wanted to come back on, which is a really key point, is around knowing what to do and where to start. And I think, so again, with a huge range of sensors on devices, I think that that can seem very overwhelming. Like you suddenly go from having very little data to then maybe after some digitalization, you've got shed loads, and it's coming in at a very fast rate. So like with customers, we're ingesting 500 gig a day. We're in, you're very quickly to the terabyte range very quickly. And so knowing where to start is key. I think that a key recommendation from us here would be around, so we have a standard discovery so opportunity scoring process to brainstorm out the business in like the wider business community. So this is all disciplines, like basically where the gold is buried. So what we generally find working with customers and manufacturers is that they know, generally people, the understanding is there, like where the gold is buried, as in the business value, the untapped potential is buried. And then it's a matter of scoring and prioritizing that to know, to help you prioritize those kind of particular projects and do one or two things really well rather than kind of 7 really badly. So I think an anti-pattern, if I could say such a thing, anti-pattern is get loads of data, throw it at a data analyst or a data scientist and say, there you go, see what you can do with that. That's usually not a great strategy. And that kind of business value prioritization process is, I think, a really key part. And also it just takes away the kind of sort of the analysis paralysis and the kind of fear factor of where do we go from here. It makes it a nicer structured roadmap and journey.
Absolutely. Kevin, is there anything you'd add to
that? First of all, on the whole, so it's a vicious cycle, really, isn't it? So if you've got too much data, least sort of bad analysis, you can get sort of companies get disillusioned, I think, with it, and therefore are less likely to invest in technologies again. And so it's a kind of a vicious cycle. Our process at Made Smarter is very much around getting the strategy right first. So as I mentioned in the introduction, we go in, look to understand the challenges and prioritize those challenges in terms of which projects can offer sort of added value most quickly. So, the sort of quick wins, I suppose. So you really evidence the value that data and analysis projects can add to the business. So yeah, again, agree that that's the real key thing, getting that business value aspect right.
Yeah, Mandy's, sorry.
So I was going to say, just to build on that. And so that comes back to the sort of business sponsorship point. So I think when we're, so very similar to what Kevin's just described, when we're prioritizing, so if you like, scoring the opportunities, the data exploitation opportunities, and helping our customers to decide where to start. So a couple of points there, Kevin saying, like, it's really key to pick 1 or 2 areas, do them well, and get that kind of So change it from a vicious cycle to a virtuous circle, right? Like, do one thing, like success breeds success, right? So just doing one thing well, even if it's relatively, sometimes it's better to start with something that's relatively low impact and not kind of shoot for the moon. As in low for the community inside the organization to make it makes the next step seem clearer, like whereas before it was seeming like in a far distance. So that's I think that's really key. And then just another example of that is that I would always favor a project with an excited sponsor with lower business impact as my first one than a project with a less excited sponsor with more impact. You see what I mean? Just to get that flywheel effect going, and then sort of, as I say, sort of success breeds success. And often what happens is the first thing is really just I think it's just better visibility. I think again was, as I mentioned, that just better insights. So once you have better visibility into your operations, that then spawns all the kind of light bulb moments. Oh, we could do this, we could do that. So that's the first step, is just to bring that visibility out, I think.
Yeah, just to come back, people really see the value of data, don't they? And they see it rather as a tool for just reporting. They see it as a tool that can really, add value to their business. So
yeah, and so I paint the negative version of what I just said. If you fall into some of the traps early on and try and do too much, or maybe pick the wrong areas, or you've got poor sponsorship, then of course one or two initiatives down the line, you can't move forward. You can't get funding to the next step because there's no, the hearts and minds haven't been won. So you've actually got that, as you say, the kind of, instead of a kind of a flywheel effect, you've got the exact opposite.
Yeah, Mandy, something that both Robin and Kevin have mentioned in one way or another is having a strategy and kind of understanding, much like any other manufacturing project you do, you know where to start, you get people on board, and then you kind of evolve it from there. How did that kind of take shape at Produmax? Did you set out a grand vision for where you wanted your digitalization to go? How did you get people on board, and kind of talk us through that journey?
I think it's important to say that we didn't set out a roadmap for digitization. We set out a roadmap for a business transformation, and digitization is one of the tools within that roadmap. Because I think sometimes it can be seen as a thing in its own right, and it isn't. It's an enabling technology. So we set out a roadmap for how to change a business. We were building a new factory. We set up a culture change process, and doing all of those things first, engaging, changing our leadership, writing our strategy, and then engaging our people behind that is what then helped our digitization programs work better. So when we designed the factory, we used VR, for instance, and closed the local gyms, floor down, and took all of our people up to a cave there so that they could work in their own area. And we stopped our factory for the day, and nobody left until we agreed on the layout, which we'd done with all of the models and stuff of the factory and the machine tools within it. I think that's really important, is engaging people behind it. I think as we go to the future and we look at where we want to go next, there's a step change that needs to come where we employ more data science skills rather than maybe traditional skills that we would have achieved. And for UK manufacturing, I think that's going to be tough, because data scientists, if we have to go to that point, because data science isn't taught correctly, you can't easily get those skills, but they're worth a lot of money. And for manufacturing, that's definitely a barrier to being able to make the most of what you do, is employing people for those sorts of figures within, SMEs. It's okay if you're a large company, but we don't have that scale. So I think there has to be some products that are introduced to the marketplace that enable SMEs to make use of an agency rather than have to do it all of this themselves. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very good point. And just to kind of further your point about data scientists and finding that sort of people, that the problem kind of goes both ways. Companies like yourselves finding them and being able to pay their wages, but also convincing these data scientists that manufacturing is a viable career, and they don't just have to go and work for Facebook or Google or a big tech company. Their skills are now as relevant in a manufacturing setting, and there's a kind of mindset shift that needs to happen. I'd be interested. Cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you look at Amazon, are they a shop? Are they a delivery company? Are they a media company? All the lines between lots of different sectors are starting to blur, and that's what digital is doing. It's enabling us to become, different versions of ourselves in terms of companies. But that means we require different skills, and we're also in a marketplace where the cost of those skills is high. So I think it's, there's a lot of change going on, a lot of disruption.
Kevin, is that something you're also hearing? Is Mandy one of many voices going along saying a similar thing there?
Yeah, it's certainly on the skills side of things. I mean, it's something we recognised and we're trying to address as a programme. I think we've got a long way to go. And we have an internship programme where we try to place, recent graduates into manufacturing companies, and to learn alongside people like Robin, technology providers like Robin, to really learn from them and help embed that technology in their business. So, we recognise it, but there's a long way to go. I think Mandy made a really good point about how different sectors are, merging, blurring the boundaries between them. I always say to the manufacturers I'm working with, expectations as towards your customer service aren't set by your competitors anymore, your direct competitors. They're set outside of your sector. People expect things on demand. It's like the Uberification of things. People get demand to see full transparency on where, their product or their order is in that process. So the expectation from your customers, it's set outside of your sector. So, we compete with everyone in some respects.
Yeah. Robin, I'll bring you in again here. Are you seeing customer demand, just like Kevin was saying there, customer demand is changing, and the way that businesses, including manufacturers, interact with their customers and their supply chain and kind of works in both directions? Is that something you're seeing changing, and how can technology kind of play a role in sorting that?
Sure, and Mandy, we must come back on that data scientist hire conversation, because as somebody who has hired lots of data scientists, I've got strong opinions on that one. Coming back to that question around sort of supply chain, so I think one of the areas that we work in quite extensively is around supply chain and distribution chain optimization. So obviously it's like, if you like, sort of outside the factory rather than inside the factory. And that's a really ripe area. So it's a really interesting area at the moment, because it's a really ripe area for optimization or better visibility first, as I mentioned, then optimization. Plus, also we've gone from a kind of world market, we've been very sort of demand constrained, if you like, to now being supply side constrained. So it's flipping around very quickly in certain sectors. So we work in automotive, for example, North America, supply chain and distribution, and it's gone from being, like what car do you want to, oh, you're gonna have to wait for your car for several weeks, right? And that really puts a different focus on the analytics and understanding you want of all your upstream supply chain and kind of sort of field to fork, or like factory to fork, or whatever you want to call it. So that's a really hot area, I think, at the moment, and getting a lot of focus, because there's also some quite significant wins in terms of, I think, coming back to what Kevin was saying around customer experience. So that it's the kind of customer perception, and by customer it could be like B2C or B2B. The kind of customer perception and understanding of when they're going to get their goods or their deliverable, and the kind of predictability of that, and do they trust your answers, and is it like reproducible over time? Can you build on that trust? So as Mandy was mentioning, so our expectation of our kind of domestic experience is now set really by like Amazon Prime and similar things, where it says it's going to come tomorrow, and it comes tomorrow, right? And that's certainly what my son expects now, right, when he orders something. And so in a kind of B2B world, everybody's expecting the same kind of level of predictability, but also transparency, visibility, and that's really tough, right? So that's one of the key drivers, I think, around this data exploitation that we talked about. It's one of the key things that a lot of customers across all sectors are looking for.
Absolutely, yeah. And manufacturers that don't adapt and kind of get on board with exactly what you were saying there, Robin, and understand that their customers are changing, and the way they need to operate is changing, and that technology can play a role in that. They're the ones that are going to get left behind and find that their competitors suddenly are the ones winning business that maybe that company had to start with.
Yeah, that's right. It's as simple as, like I say, in my automotive distribution example, it's as simple as you won't sell the car because you can't give a predictable answer as to when it'll be in stock. It's as simple as that, and somebody else can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, is that that's something you'd agree with? It's now business critical to.
Absolutely, it's the sort of number one challenge that companies are coming to us with at the moment. You know, alongside the challenges, common challenges which are always there around time and skills that we've discussed before, but increasingly now this supply side challenges are more prominent. And I think, you know, people are becoming more aware that they need to share their data more readily with other manufacturers in order to get better. So with other manufacturers, other businesses, in order to get better analytics and understanding of that sort of whole supply chain. So
just to build on that whole supply chain thing, so I focus very much there on the kind of customer experience end, and by customer it could be like Mandy as a customer of your raw materials, right? So that everybody's a customer and a supplier, but there's also the you probably noticed that fuel costs have gone up, right? And it might have come across your desk, and so and then you've also got that kind of perfect storm of sustainability and emissions management. So there's like a multi-dimensional optimization problem here of delivery speed and predictability at what emissions and at what delivery costs, because of the fuel costs are going through the roof, which obviously is massively affecting the supply chain. The proportion of, if you like, transport costs as a proportion of kind of raw material cost, or cost of goods out the door, is such a high proportion and increasing that all those factors working together. So we're just kind of wrestling with how to optimize across those three things. Some of them kind of go together. So if you can obviously improve efficiency, you can therefore improve emissions and reduce sort of transit costs or fuel costs. So it's not like they're completely orthogonal, like fighting each other. But it's like a super, you might say in data science land, it's like a super wicked optimization problem. And that's what all organizations need to wrestle with, and they need to do it in a really sort of adaptable, sort of dynamic way, because things are so dynamic in that area around supply side demand, and also the kind of emissions regulatory environment and the kind of fuel cost side.
Absolutely, there's so many challenges facing businesses at the moment, whether it's rising fuel costs, like you said, Robin, a need to be more sustainable, and having data and kind of understanding how the business is operating can certainly help mitigate some of those rising costs, either by making things more efficient, or just having a better understanding of what's going on where, I suppose. Mandy, I'll come to you again quickly, and just kind of go back to that skills, the kind of people angle. Obviously you spoke about the challenges of hiring people with the kind of required data skills, but if we kind of take your current workforce, your existing workforce, how have you got them on your kind of digitalization journey, and has there been any resistance, I suppose, for want of a better word, from some members of staff, and how have you combated that?
I think this is the point where you don't look at this as a digitization piece. You look at this as business as usual, and how are we going to get to where we want to go? And if we get to where we're going to go, what does that mean for you? So engaging people behind your vision and your mission, and having your values embedded within your organization, helps you get to where you want to be. So people understanding why we're doing something in a different way is critical to them wanting to be engaged with that. If they understand why we're doing it and what it's going to mean for the company, and therefore for their job security or pay, ultimately is really important. So we do tons of work on employee engagement, and it makes it a lot easier when you then roll things out. And I think, as was said earlier by Robin, making sure that when you've got some projects, you share the successes so that people can see what benefits those have brought. But we haven't just digitized our production processes. We've gone back to digitizing how you book holiday, how you interact with your e-pay slip, You know, we've got an app for what's going on in the business. So it's digitizing every single bit of your business, and allowing people to interact with that. We've also took a decision quite a long time ago to employ more young people. So I think the average age in UK engineering is 52 and ours is less than 35. So we're 20% apprentices. And so we're always bringing young people through. And young people demand digital solutions. They expect them, they don't resist them as much. So that definitely helps with having a young workforce.
That's very interesting. The digital natives phrase gets bandied around a lot, and I always find it crazy that, you know, we're all sat at home on our iPads and using technology without a second thought, and then we go to manufacturers go to work and step over the threshold into the factory and are quite happy to use bits of paper and kind of go back 30 years, go back in time 30 years. So it's really interesting to hear.
To illustrate that, Chris, we were manually checking a component, a turns component. So it's taken about an hour and a half to manually check it. It was quite a complex piece. And we bought a new laser optical measuring machine, which uses data. And we gave it to one of our most skilled engineers to program that. And he cut the time down from 90 minutes. He cut it down by 15 minutes, which is significant in manufacturing. We then gave it to a 17-year-old apprentice and said, you've got 2 weeks, see what you can do with that. And they took it from 90 minutes to 90 seconds. And that is when you start to get massive wins in the business. And also it starts to show that it's not how old you are, it's how good you are that is important. And so we use that a lot through the business. But we also upskill everybody at the same time so that everybody can engage with that digital piece. But I think it's important that you get that employee engagement piece right in the first place so that everybody understands this is on the journey with you, and why you're doing things.
Yeah, great. What a great example that is of digital natives and young people being that good with technology and understanding where to make improvements. And Kevin and Robin, I'll bring you back in there and see what you have to say to Mandy's experiences there. Kevin, is that must be music to your ears, I'm sure.
I mean, it sounds like you've got a great company to work in, Mandy. I'm afraid I think you're the exception in my experience of manufacturers, though. I've worked with companies that, £1 million turnover still use paper. I think that's the problem with manufacturing. It's so vast. The scale of manufacturing is so underestimated that there's just such a lot of variation in the sector in terms of readiness to adopt technologies. See Mandy's companies right at the forefront doing everything that we would advocate to do. But there's definitely some other companies I've met that are not.
That's the trouble. How do you get everybody on the same page? And Robin, how do you get everybody on the same page? I'll come to you with that exact question.
Well, that's a great story as well, Mandy. I really love that. I think I suppose maybe I'm a bit fatalistic about it in that in Inawisdom, we're not trying to get everybody on the same page. We're dealing with the early adopters, frankly. I mean, I don't. That sounds like a negative, but I mean it. That it's a positive, right? So we can't. We can only kind of uplift the state of best practice, like one use case at a time, and where there's I know I mentioned it before, but where there's strong sponsorship, strong vision is a better word. So I say sponsor, but it's really about the vision, and I think if it's a real light bulb moment for me when our customers have access to data that's always been kind of locked away from them. It's probably existed, right, in recent times at least, and they just have visibility. And that first step of seeing the data then leads to questions and like what ifs and why, and then to insights, and therefore to the next step of change and some kind of business improvement, so process improvement or optimization. That's the real exciting light bulb moment. So I think, but it will take time. It'll take a long time, right, to wash through. I mean, to give a comparator to like the IT sector, like, so we talk a lot, there's a huge discussion around cloud computing, and we work natively with Amazon Web Services as our sort of preferred partner and weapon of choice all the time. And so we all heard about cloud computing and we're all kind of familiar with it, but there's still actually, there's still like a vast number of data centers around the world. Like we're still, as the head of Amazon Web Services has said many times, we're still really just at the beginning of the journey. So I think what I'm trying to say is in any industry transformational change, you've got your leaders and your laggards, and it takes a very, very long time for that to wash through.
Absolutely, yeah. Kevin or Mandy, is there anything you'd add to that?
I think you're absolutely right, but I think that's going to happen a lot more quickly now, as the world's moving more quickly. Companies will move on or not exist. So I don't think we have any choice but to get on board. But I agree with you completely, Robin, that we consider ourselves to be an early adopter. And getting that speed of innovation across that bell curve is really difficult.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I sort of painted a negative picture there, but I think we are at a tipping point. I mean, we're absolutely at a tipping point in data exploitation. And so one of the phrases, I think it's in the report, but one of the phrases I often try out is I've got more data about myself on my Fitbit or my Garmin watch than generally everybody has. Everybody has a much better experience understanding their personal biometric data than they do when they go to the office, right? So so that expectation that you mentioned in the kind of in the digital natives or younger workforce, that expectation is very quickly it's demanded as normal, right? So yes, I think it's that we're at that tipping point, and also I think the if you like the flagship stories and the projects and the exciting things that have been achieved. They're really some amazing case studies. So coming back to building on that, coming back to your point about data scientists in manufacturing, I think that some of the most exciting projects we've worked on are because they're what's really attractive to a data scientist, for example, working in this area is it's super tangible, right? A lot of data science is quite it's data, right? So it's like working on mathematical models for finance data or something. It's quite abstract, which is really attractive to lots of people. But in the manufacturing side, it's so tangible, the impact. I did this, and look at that change, that physically changed. I can see that's better. Like as you say, it's going through the production process, in virtually zero step instead of 90 minutes. And so that really, lots of people really crave that feedback. So I think that's a real one of the real advantages in the kind of manufacturing sector is just the sheer tangibility of it.
I think, could I just come back on that one of the things, I think if we have the ability to engage more data scientists, I think we'll be better off. And whether that will become for SMEs in-house or whether through an agency sort of environment, an app system where we can get our data somewhere and then pull down stuff through an app process, I don't know. However, the other issue for manufacturers is that the banks look at things in a very old-fashioned way. So if I want to buy a new machine tool, I can get HP on that because they can come and repossess that machine if I didn't pay my monthly installments. When we're talking about digital improvements, with the exception of help that you might get from Made Smarter, which is a fantastic initiative, you cannot do that in the same way or as easily. And so I think the governments or the banks are going to have to look at manufacturing differently. So how do we support businesses on patient capital terms? So if you want to do something really transformative, how do we get funding to do that, that we can pay back over a long period of time, not up front, which is what's happening with a lot of things now. And I think that would be really help some of that digital adoption, because what we've got to look at is, are people not digitizing because they don't want to, or because it's too expensive? And I think if we can get the people that want to, but it's too expensive, and find a solution for that, we might get a faster route to a more digitized manufacturing base.
So that's a very good point, Mandy. Kevin, I can see you wanting to say something there.
I mean, Mandy name checked, so it's very kind of you, Mandy, but that is exactly what we're here to do. We could do more, we know that, but we're restricted by the money that we get from government. But, of course we want more. We want to roll it out in more areas than the regions we're working in now. And I think, there's lots of ways we can help. We spoke before about the laggards. I think that's where we fit in, maybe working with those people at very early stage, getting them ready to adopt more advanced technologies. And I think another point you made about case studies as well, they're so important. They're our most vital tool to shine a light on really great practice like the stuff we're talking about here, and to really elevate that, because that's how we get buy-in, I think, across the industry, is but showing them it can be done, not telling them, showing them there's other companies like them that have done it, and it's not easy, but you can get there. So I think that's the really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That was going to kind of lead into my next and going towards the end, sort of a kind of concluding bit of the discussion. Really, is where manufacturers, you know, Robin, you spoke about wanting to kind of set people off on their journey, and maybe, you know, Mandy and companies like hers are well ahead of the curve, but you're wanting to get people started on their journey. And how do we encourage that? Kevin's point about shouting about the successes and kind of highlighting the companies again, like Produmax, that are doing very well. How important is that? And if, you know, manufacturers watching this wanting to start their digitalization journey or do more with their data or anything like that, what would your advice be to those companies about where to take that first step and kind of where to put their focus, I suppose?
Just the first thing to say is I just wanted to point back to Mandy's point around the kind of wider business transformation and digitalization sort of framing of this question, right? So I think that's a really key point, that sort of data exploitation is and the technologies and tooling we've talked about is a part of that bigger framework and picture and vision, right? So then drilling into sort of the exploitation of data and leveraging that and how to get going, or like where to start. I think that there's I thought it was a really interesting point around the kind of financing point you just made as well, that I think that there's lots of relatively low cost or even zero cost ways of sort of doing sort of proof of concept type projects to say I think there's a kind of, there's almost like a wall to get over for some organizations around, you know, they can obviously see that there's an opportunity here and they probably need to get on the bus, otherwise they'll be left behind, right? But at the same time, it's like hard to get over that initial inertia. That's what I'm trying to say. So I think so as I mentioned, we work closely with Amazon Web Services, and we're routinely finding ways to fund or semi-fund innovation projects to just take existing data sets and say, right, what value can we answer this exam question or these exam questions that move this business KPI from this data set using machine learning or even just standard sort of descriptive analytics, you know, like reporting. And I think so those are well within the reach of lots of organizations, I think. And again, it's like, you know, if the business case, if the prize, if at the end of it is visible, the size of the potential prize, then I think those business cases can hold water, and therefore the investment will be there, and we'll better make it happen between us and our partners generally.
Thanks. Yeah. Kevin, is there anything you'd add to that?
I'm sorry, I forgot where we started, Robin. What was the question you asked, Chris? Apologies.
Where can manufacturers start their journey towards, you know, understanding their data better and kind of starting their digitalization?
I think the main sort of takeaway I would leave is to start small, to start with those projects that can be impactful and, you know, add value to your business, and then build from there. Very much a learn by doing approach, I think, is the one I would advocate for. Yeah,
thanks, Kevin. And Mandy, anything you'd like to add to what Kevin and Robin have said there?
I think it's to make sure you've scoped out your vision, worked out where you're going, and worked out what it is that you want to change, because that will lead you to the best projects for you. I think it's important when the government does invest to help manufacturing with Made Smarter, that the money's invested in companies that are going to learn from the process and don't have one thing they're going to do, but then have a waterfall of things they'd like to do after that. So they take what they've been helped with, but then apply that learning and build on it. Because if we just throw money at people to change one element of their business in digitization, and then Made Smarter goes and they don't move on, then we've wasted that, because they're going to be left behind again. We need to make sure that we're choosing the companies that watch things like this and are hungry to change and to be leaner and better, and invest in those, because that will give us the best bang for our buck.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think definitely go for the ones that want to make the change and find the easy wins. It's a point that I think all three of you made there. That's kind of we've kind of run out of time, unfortunately. It's always a fascinating discussion, and we probably could have filled another hour or so at least with kind of expanding on some of the points. But as I mentioned, a lot of what we've covered will be in the Inawisdom white paper, which you'll find linked below this video. So please feel free to look through that and expand your knowledge around the importance of data and kind of making the most of your processes that way. But for now, thank you to Mandy and to Kevin, and of course to Robin and Inawisdom for sponsoring today's session. And thank you all for your time, and hopefully see you again on the next Manufacturing Management Live panel very soon. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.